today we're going to be looking at disordered desires. We're going to be kind of taking a look as to what that really means. We kind of talked about it already with boys. And then we're going to look at the main two hurdles for girls, comparison and perfectionism. And I know that I'm not the only one that relates to those. So there are instances, basically this is the two buckets where most of the girls find that they mainly sin. Okay, so if we trace it back, a lot of it has to do with comparison and perfectionism. There's a possibility that boys also, there could be some comparison there. Boys are very competitive as well in many aspects, like athletes and all that. But in the majority of the time, we're going to find that girls are really going to struggle with these two areas. So when sin entered the world, everything was basically fractured, is what we've been talking about, okay? Sin broke God's beautiful, perfect creation. And because of the fall, both men and women are going to be wrestling with particular sins and struggles, unfortunately. And today we're going to look at, in particular, what plagues women, okay? And what is keeping us from living to our full potential in God's beautiful design. So I want somebody to read this really quick. Anybody?
Right?
Somebody read.
Oh wait. To the woman he said, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Okay,
so traditionally when we have thought about this verse and when it has been explained, it has been in a way where women, in an essence, after the fall, are usurping, in a way, the place of the men. Like they want to have control, they want to be in some way, they kind of want to steal that headship at times, if not all the time. But we're going to be finding out that it was kind of the decision to disobey that brought struggles and problems for both Eve and Adam, because we think, oh, the pain of childbirth, that was only for Eve. But remember that for the men, it was also, they were going to have to labor now and work really, really hard. And with sweat of their face, we're going to have to sustain their family. And Eve would have this desire to hijack the God-given authority of headship to the men. But Adam, on the other hand, was going to desire as well to abuse his authority, in essence, okay? So why? Because of sin. So I just want to kind of sit there for a second, just kind of think about it. So what do we think about when we think about disordered desires? And that's what we get from this first session. And we're going to be looking at, let me see if I have it. I'll talk to you guys first about this. So we see in the Bible several instances of this, of where men haven't truly stepped up and become, the leader that the family needs. And as a result, a lot of the times women are kind of stuck wanting to usurp that place and kind of step in. But if we really think about it, it's all been kind of like a full circle where women were created, in fact, to be very, very, in essence, in need of a man. Remember that we talked, what was the key word for women in women's purpose last class? She was what? A helper, right? So from the get-go, women were created to be, in fact, a helper to the men. So that, in essence, has given us kind of like a little, we want that love, we want that attention from the men, we want the men to step up and be that for us. But because of sin, men can take advantage of that kind of desire that the woman may feel. And as a result, men can, in many instances, abuse this kind of desire that the woman has to be complimented with the men, to have that authority, but in a loving way. So how, in the modern day world, do we see the woman fight back that authority? It's feminism, okay? So basically, the woman was decided to, in fact, want that man to provide the emotional, spiritual, and physical support that a lot of the times we realize it was never meant to be fully complete in the men. It was meant to be complete in who? In God. So when that breaks, then apart from God, men are going to oppress women in return. Again, this is not for every instance, but generally speaking, that's tends to happen. And then that in turn is going to bring about this whole, like, I'm independent, I don't need a man, I'm self-sufficient, I can work on myself, I don't need no man to sustain me kind of thing. So you see how it's almost like a vicious cycle where one thing leads to the next, that leads to the next, that leads to the next. So we see this a little bit in the story of Lot. Who remembers when I believe Darwin talked and spent a little bit of time not too long ago in this story. So remember Lot? Lot was who? Who was Lot?
Abraham's nephew.
Abraham's nephew. And what had they done?
Who?
Between Abraham and Lot. They had separated. Lot had gone to Sodom and Gomorrah, and then in there he was basically starting to develop his living with his family, etc. But what happens? He was several times encouraged to basically leave the city because it was so broken down and it was in such a bad shape. And he was kind of ignoring that. He was ignoring the message until literally angels had to go and get him out of there, okay? So he had a lack of leadership and headship, so he failed to protect his family. As a matter of fact, do you guys remember what happens when the rest of the men in the city tried to break into his house, and because they wanted to have relationships with the angels, with the men, of God that were there. Do you guys remember what Lot decides to do? He offers, here you go, you can have my daughters, but please don't mess with, because there was a very, in that setting, time, and hospitality was like a big thing. So if you bring somebody into your shelter, into your house, you're supposed to basically do anything to support and, protect that person. So that's the first step where he failed in leadership and headship. He goes, here you go, you can have my daughters. And then what happened after that? And that's, remember, the selfish passivity and selfish aggression. So this would be an example of selfish passivity. And then, as a matter of fact, the daughters had fiancés as well, and they had a chance to leave, and then decided not to. So that's another example where we see men were not leaders, as God intended them to be. And then, what really sucks about this story is that at the end, the girls see they have to run and basically hide out in like some cave or something, and then they figure out that the only man in the whole world was their father. And there was a big weight on women back in the day to bear children and to hold the family line, essentially. So they make their father drunk, and each one of them sleeps with their dad, so that they could have children and carry on the family name. Now, where did the problem start? And the male authority and the lack of his headship and leadership. So a lot of the problems that we see have to do with that essence of it. And we're gonna make choices sometimes out of desperation, because we, are caught we think that there's no other way out, but what we end up getting is regret and shame and heartbreak. And instead of looking to God for the solution, we start to think that we ourselves have the solution to it all. So to get into this, this is something that you guys are going to be looking at in the study time. I just put it here. But what Matt Chandler tries to, the point that he tries to give is that it's not as easy as when we say, well, the desire for the woman will be for the man, in essence, like wanting to usurp that power. What he brings us back to is James 1. So can somebody read this for me, please? Alyssa, can you read for me, please?
But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then after their desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death.
Thank you. Very good. And then somebody else read this one. Eric.
What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire but do not have, so you kill. You covet but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive, because you ask with the wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures.
So basically, what we're trying to understand here with disordered desires is that even good desires placed in a setting of, like when we place them to an ultimate standard, and I'll explain that in a second, can in fact become bad, okay? So when we're looking at disordered desires for men, again, we remember that we talked about selfish passivity and selfish aggression, okay? So it's in any way that their natural inclination is gonna lead them essentially to sin. But what these verses are telling us is that we can't just point fingers and blame the men. And the men cannot just point fingers and it was Eve that took of the fruit. Because at the end of the day, what it boils down to is our own hearts. It's what's in our own hearts. So each person is tempted when they're dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. So where's the bait? What's the actual bait? It's ourselves. When we let our own desires be out of proportion to what God really wanted them to be, and then it becomes essentially the lead into sin and ultimately death, and that's why we are mortals now. So now that we understand a little bit, and let me talk to you guys a bit about even good desires, because you might be like, well, it's a good thing to even want to make a good living. It's a good thing to want to, start a good job. It's a good thing to even want a big house. And there's a lot of good things. But guess what? If everything in you is gonna lean on this one thing, like you're gonna sacrifice everything else in your life. You're gonna sacrifice your family. You're gonna sacrifice your kids. You're gonna sacrifice, your time and devotion to the Lord for the sake of this one good thing. Well, guess what? Is that good thing good now? No. So disordered desires, again, is when we take also out of proportion. It's not just the desire to kill or the desire to, rob someone. Like, it's also when the natural desires of every human are taken out of proportion. Okay? And the disordered desires that young women are most prone to give into are comparison and perfectionism. So this is just a refresher of So you would think that women would want to look or ask the opinion of a guy as to how she looks, correct? Like, you look for the opposite sex to see, obviously, if you're single, if that person finds you or not attractive, correct? Well, maybe not so much. So comparison is the disordered desire for approval and validation. So it's our desire to want to get that acceptance from either men or even girls, okay? Because you want your friends that are girls to also like you and accept you as you are. And we're going to look into a particular story. Somebody, if you guys want to kind of quickly skim through Genesis 16, I have to sum it up because of time. But when we look at Sarai, so Sarah, Abraham's wife, remember what the story was kind of about? What happened to Sarah? She couldn't have kids, correct? And what was her solution?
She had her
So her disordered desire, again, was it bad for her to want to have kids?
No.
Remember, they're in a culture where having kids was like, you needed to have kids. If not, you were worthless. Because women were basically valuable for their ability to conceive and, prolong the family line. So for a woman to not be able to conceive, she was in a tough spot. You guys remember how old Sarah was? When they talk about this?
90?
She was old. Like, women don't even have kids at past 50, maybe like at 40 something, they're pushing it nowadays. So for a 90-year-old woman, was it a wrong desire to want to have a child?
No.
No. But where's the problem?
She didn't wait.
she wanted to take it into her own hands. God had already given Abraham the promise that there would be somebody conceived from Sarah and Abraham. But Sarah couldn't wait. She was so desperate, and she had doubted God at this point that she decided it was better to, and honestly, I have to clarify that a little bit, like it wasn't like, it was commonly accepted to do that. You know, like the slave, which was Hagar, it was commonly known for women, you know, the masters essentially, to give their female servants
to breed children,
to breed children, or to do what they could do whatever they wanted with them. You know, this was commonly accepted. This wasn't like a violation of human rights in that time. Okay, so just to kind of clarify that. But the point here is that she had Hagar lay with Abraham. Hagar did in fact conceive, and guess what happened? She despised Sarai for it, because now Sarai was mistreating Hagar, because all of a sudden she realized, oh, maybe I made a small little bit mistake, because now Hagar all of a sudden is like, well, not only can I have kids, I gave your husband a child, and what you gonna do about it? You still haven't had one. So an angel, Hagar, because she was so mistreated, she flees, and an angel of the Lord basically goes to her and tells her to submit to Sarah, and as a promise to her, she was gonna receive many, like she was gonna have a lot of kids. She was gonna have a big line of descendants. So what do we learn from this? When time passed and Sarah remained barren, and again, it's Sarah, but remember God changes the name afterwards. She was probably feeling without any self-worth. She was probably feeling like her faith was wavering, and she was in fact already doubting God. But she exchanged her trust in the Lord for her own attempt to make it work. And a lot of the times, in this case, once her maid became pregnant, don't you think she probably regretted that? I mean, it's obvious. All of a sudden, feelings of comparison and insecurity probably rushed into her, because not only was she unable to provide her husband with an heir, someone else could, and in fact did. So Sarai, as we know in the story, later does conceive, and she has Isaac. Okay, so the promise was accomplished, the promise was fulfilled. But where is the problem? She went through so much heartbreak, probably. Can you imagine two women living under the same roof, giving birth to kids of the same dad? I mean, even nowadays, like, it goes bad really, really fast, you know, when things are not very clarified in these scenarios. And again, this is where we tend to step in a lot of the times when we try to take things in our own hands, okay? But this is exactly what sin does. It crouches at the door of comparison, promising us a feeling of security, like, it's okay, Sarah, you know, Hagar is gonna have your issues resolved. But at the end of the day, you're just hopeless and in despair because you went against what God strictly told you was gonna happen. So this is a woman that gets quoted several times on the video, and I wanted to kind of share with you guys this quote because I thought it was really interesting. So a recent study confirmed it. Women spend more time checking each other out than they do the opposite sex. What do you guys think about that? So in that same, do you guys remember Mean Girls?
Yeah.
I was going to play a clip, but it was probably going to take us overboard. So Dr. Carolyn Walters, she was also quoted in this article. This was an article written by Julia Oliphant, and she was published in a UK magazine called The Telegraph. So then she quotes Caroline and says, women compare everything with each other, from hairstyle to tan, shape, size, even body hair and fat distribution. Whatever we deem most important ourselves, we check out in other women. So what do you guys think about that? You know, with Eve going up to Adam and asking him, you know, how she looked, what we're actually finding out is that who we really want the approval of, and if if you girls are honest with yourselves, a lot of the time, who is it? Yes, you want to attract the single girls, you want to attract the men, you want them to look at you, but who in the back of your mind, when you look in the mirror, doesn't like, fulanita, she would love this dress, she would think this would be hot. Or this high heels, I know Alina is going to tell me something about these heels because she loves those shoes. So we like that approval and acceptance from our equals, from other girls. So what we end up finding out is that we are looking, in fact, at a lot of girls, but we're not really looking with a heart of sincerity, and like it's just girls like, oh, it's, you look, sometimes, you know what bothers me a lot? And it was actually brought to my attention, because apparently I did it at some point. Like I would compliment a friend of mine as to like, oh my goodness, your dress is so pretty. Well, can you remember the person behind the dress? And we tend to fall into that. Have you guys thought about that? That, oh my goodness, I love, and again, there's nothing wrong with that. I love fashion. We all love fashion. A lot of the girls do for the most part. But we tend to materialize everything. And we make it very like, Elisa, those shoes, girl, you're rocking them. A lot of the times, it's more about the shoe than it is about the individual. Like, it's not, my friend, you look so pretty today. That dress looks beautiful on you. It's like, I love that dress. Well, what happened to the person?
And I'm talking about those material things instead of just asking them how they're doing emotionally. And
Exactly.
really connecting with your friends on that level rather than just on superficial things that don't really matter.
Exactly, we're gonna get to that. So when you encounter a woman who seems to have it all together, and again, this doesn't necessarily mean just physical, okay? It could be emotionally, it could be intellectually. You're gonna be drawn to the person that you find is what Matt Chandler later goes on to explain, like the alpha female. It's really funny what he says in the interview. He's like, yeah, I didn't even know there was an alpha female. And as it turns out, there is this kind of like leader of the pack woman who's the smartest or the prettiest or the smartest or most fashion forward or whatever. And you're gonna find all these other little girls just kind of hovering around Leslie, because Leslie's really, really smart and I need to have some of that rub off on me, Or you're gonna go around, and again, I'm just naming names to kind of make this fun, don't take any of it personal. I'll go around Lorena, because Lorena's very pretty and she dresses so nice and I want some of that to rub off on me, okay? So we, a lot of the times, are doing it unconsciously, but guess what happens?
Don't gas her up, please.
If we're honest with ourselves, what thoughts are actually being elicited when we see those women that are so intelligent or so emotionally, like they seem to have it all together, they have no problems, or they're just, my goodness, like a step down from Victoria's Secret model. So what are the feelings that really come about? A lot of the times, the problem when we start to compare and to look at these other women is we start to feel jealousy. We start to envy some of the things that these girls might have. God forbid, we might be even angry, like it's not fair that she gets to have that car, or it's not fair that she gets to be able to buy those shoes, like we get this kind of just very ugly feelings. Is it, sometimes, I'm not saying, sometimes it could be honest, true God, admiration, but a lot of the times we feel inferior. All of a sudden we're, oh, she's so much prettier than I am, I could never, be up to her standard. Oh, she's so much smarter. I would never be able to be like her. I wish I could be like her. Inadequacy, frustration. So I really, from the bottom of my heart, encourage you guys to start looking at this word, comparison, side to side with competition. It's okay to look up to people. It's okay for you to have a role model that you aspire to be like in some aspects and areas. I really hope that you guys have that for your spiritual life, which is what Dylan just said is the most important part of it. But I want you guys to encourage each other. You guys are not here to tear each other down and just destroy. We're gonna see a little clip that we're gonna talk about how this just leads into ugly situations that trickle down from this. So take opportunities to build each other up. You know, when you see Melissa looking all beautiful, don't just compliment her again on her dress. Look deeper. Learn to love each other to a level that when you step outside in the world, they're gonna see that you are different. That you guys love each other differently. Then it isn't just a superficial thing. Because what ends up happening a lot of the times is we put on this veneer. Do you guys know what a veneer is in dentistry or anywhere else?
Like the thing that they use when they drill or something.
No, it's when you put a piece of real wood over like a piece of plywood.
So a veneer is basically like a facade, so like a layer that goes over something. So it happens in teeth when we're trying to cover ugly teeth. We'll put on veneers. They're usually made out of porcelain to cover, the staining or the fractures that the teeth naturally might have. So in a similar way, it's almost like we're putting on a mask.
Makeup.
I'm so glad that you brought that up. Because nobody here takes a picture of themselves just hanging out, looking like crap. You don't. You wait for the perfect angle. You wait for, I remember Jillian and I and Andrea, whenever we used to take a picture, it's hilarious. Because we're, no, this is my side, hold up. Wait, what was my side? No, it's this side. And we all have that, right? Like nobody just takes a picture.
Even when you snap the pictures, it's still perfectly planned.
Yes, everything is like, oh, just hanging out. No, it's not just hanging out. You perfectly planned everything about that, okay? So, what is the worst thing that could happen to a woman that struggles with comparison and perfectionism? Give them a phone and social media, and then you just stir up the pot. Because all of a sudden, I have to confess, there's a lot of people that I stopped following. Because when I dug deep and I really saw what my heart was feeling when I saw some of these ladies, I was like, man, this is jealousy. And that's not good. That's not what God wants me to feel towards this person. And this could be like a very nice girl that I'm judging just because I don't look like her. Because I don't have, the ability to work out a whatever ab thing. Six-pack ab. I don't even know the name of it. And a lot of the times, that's what we end up finding. And we scroll through that phone, and we look through everything over and over again. And if we're honest with each other, we're not always so innocent. A lot of the times we're picking at each other. Ay, ese pelo estaba hoy en candela. Oye, pero que ella no se pintó mejor, los míos, no puede ser. Ay, oh, mira ese outfit. Ella, oh my goodness, ratchet don't work still. That's so ratchet. All of a sudden, you're not really looking at the heart and the soul. There is a person there with a soul that we're tearing apart. So, if it means that you have to unfollow some people so that you don't have those feelings, go ahead and do so. Go ahead and do so. Or if it means that you have to dig deep into yourself and talk to God and be like, Lord, and you have to confess those things. There's some feelings that I've been having and it's not good. I've been just thinking about the wrong things. I've been judging. I've been gossiping. I've been doing all these things, and instead of encouraging these girls encouraging each other, I'm actually tearing them apart. I want you guys to rejoice in the success. There's so much envy that comes about when you start to see, that friend of yours sometimes, if you're not in check, have that person succeed. We have to be careful with that. It's almost like I'm not pointing fingers. I'm bringing it right back to me because this is a struggle for us women, no matter if we're 20, 30, 40, 50, or 80. I still hear my grandma every now and then be like, ay, pero esa mujer no sé qué cosa, y yo por dentro me diciendo, mima, you haven't seen yourself in a long time in a mirror? Like, you cannot be criticizing other people. Oh, mami. No, porque aquella, porque no sé qué cosa. Mami, you're her same age. How do you think you look? We have to be careful. And we fall right back into it. It happens on a professional level. When you guys start college, oh my goodness. Bring it on. Bring on the competition. Like, cutthroat, cut head. Like, my roommate did not tell me she was going to be an oral surgeon until a year prior to her becoming or getting accepted into residency. Because it was so competitive that she was even worried about sharing that information with anybody. Even myself, who I have lived with her for 3 years. That's the kind of world that is out there right now. So I want you guys to think about this. Rejoice in the success. And when those feelings are not good, confess it to God and ask Him to just bring about a desire for you to honestly and genuinely feel happy for the well-being of these girls or women. And when they do fail, it isn't our job to be pointing fingers and I told you so, and I knew this was going to happen. Oh, I knew she was going to get pregnant. It isn't the time for that. When they fail, encourage those who need it. Okay, there is a time and a place for everything. So be careful, again, with the things that you say and the feelings that you're actually stirring up inside of you. And I love this verse. I don't matter how many times I read it, it centers me because it reminds me, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. Write that down. Highlight it on your Bible. Whenever you're struggling with self-doubt, whenever you are struggling with self-worth, that you don't feel that you're good enough, or by all means, gather around people that honestly do care about you. Find friends that are going to build you up. But there were times where even my closest friends, they had, issues to deal with on their own life. When I was going through the craziness of dental school, Dillian was having giving birth to a net. So there were, situations where I couldn't necessarily press. She was one text away or one call away when I was breaking down. But there are situations where even having all those people, I remember one time, and you probably are going to hear me say this over and over again. When Satan robs you of your joy through whatever circumstances, because your stress levels are out to here because of school, because you're struggling and you're working, or you're working and studying, that God knows that that's really hard too. But there are times when you can be surrounded by friends and family and you still feel alone. And Satan is going to try to press into that space and make you think that you are not good enough. You're going to go through depression, maybe. You're going to be even more anxious. You're going to end up in a hospital like I did 3 times with anxiety attacks. So in those times when even your friends are not enough to build you up and encourage you, the only thing that I found, girls, that was bringing me back and centering me was the Word. It was remembering that God had created me from day one of the series with a purpose. That I was where I was by His grace because He wanted me to be there. And I didn't quit dental school, as hard as it was and as crazy as it drove me, because I knew that God had placed me there for a reason. He had delivered me to that particular place for a reason, and he was gonna get me out of there. Why? Because he had done it over and over again in the past. So whenever you're struggling with those feelings of comparison, you don't feel good enough, you don't feel like you're smart enough, you're not pretty enough, or whatever the case might be, press into the Word of God, because he's never gonna fail you. Your friends could fail you, even your family members can fail you, but the Word of God is never going to. And now let's talk a little bit about perfectionism, which have a lot to talk about. Because this girl right here, I'm a perfectionist about just about everything. Except sometimes, well, Darwin will argue that right now, don't go to my house right now. Because there are things and priorities that take place in my perfectionism. So right now, the perfectionism a lot of times has to do with, I want to be the best I can be at the new job that I'm at. And it's almost like I kind of focus it around that particular area. And then the downside of that is that a lot of the times we start letting go of all the other areas of our lives that we need to also be mindful of. But it can happen if you're closed up in any particular area where you really want to succeed, where you want to be the best at something. I was a perfectionist even with the charcuterie boards that I was bringing in on Saturday. Like, it gets to a level where sometimes it hurts me because I can't see one little thing out of place. Like, everything has to be the way that I want it to. Oh goodness, the wedding. Let's just say that I had a couple friends tell me, like, Eliana, you need to stop. You need to let us do something because you can't do it all. You're the bride. You're gonna need to have some, refreshing, beautiful sleep before the day of your wedding, which didn't happen. So perfectionism can eat away at us if we let it take over. So it is the disordered desire, and it is disordered, for righteousness and perfection apart from Christ. But actually, what he's getting at is that words can in fact tear other people, okay? For wives to do it to their husbands, it will destroy their husbands. And for girls to do it about each other in the form of gossip or slander or any way that kind of resembles that. Oh, come on. Okay. Then you're going to be seeing it as this. It's horrible. Like, we don't even have to hit a person. Just by saying something, we can destroy them. So we have to be very, very careful with our words, okay? And I'm going to read this and then just chat a little bit about it, and that's kind of where we got to close it out. But so underqualified men, this is about perfectionism aspect of it. Underqualified and underprepared men don't think twice about leaning in. Overqualified, that means that a man will not be qualified and he still will want a shot at whatever it is that he wants to do. So he's underprepared, he doesn't have the best GPA, but he wants to go to Harvard. And if he has the chance, he will apply and go. And he will look like, Santa Claus, and he will stare in front of the mirror and say, "Ah, estoy buenísimo, pero buenísimo." Because that's the way that men usually, proceed about themselves. What happens to women? Overqualified and overprepared. Too many women still hold back. Women feel confident only when they are perfect or practically perfect. Study after study has shown that perfectionism, is largely a female issue, one that extends through women's entire lives. We don't answer questions until we're totally sure of an answer. We don't submit a report until we've edited ad nauseum. And we don't sign up for the triathlon unless we know that we are faster and fitter than is required. We fixate on performance at home, at school, at work, at yoga class, even on vacation. We obsess as mothers, as wives, as sisters, as friends, as cooks, as athletes. It's going to wear you out. We cannot be perfect at everything. Actually, at anything. So we have to get this, veneer out of our face and start showing the real us to other people. And stop pretending that we're somebody else just to impress either a guy or to get the applause of your girlfriends. And we have to understand that this carries on the rest of our lives in really nasty ways. Because then guess what happens when you have kids? And that's also something that he mentions earlier on. Now you are struggling as a mother because you want this child to be the perfect person, and anything that you couldn't accomplish yourself, you want to live through this person. I'm guilty, and I don't have kids yet. I did it to Elizabeth. I was like, I couldn't have this on my 15th, so you're gonna have it. I couldn't, you're gonna go to Europe. Like, we have to be careful, because all of a sudden we start to put this excess amount of weight on the people that we love. And to ourselves, we are destroying ourselves, thinking that the only way that we can be noticed, the only way that we can be successful is that we are the top. Forget the C's in class. I'm not encouraging C's. By all means, study hard and get A's and B's or all A's, whatever the case might be.
C's get degrees.
But hey, I've gotten a couple C's. I did. And I failed some tests. And it's okay. You know, it's okay. So again, I'm not encouraging mediocrity. I want you guys to succeed. I want you guys to pour and give excellence. But if that is inhibiting you from living a joyful and peaceful life in Christ, we gotta reevaluate. So in what areas of your life are you guys struggling with perfectionism? How do you feel when your expectations of yourself don't line up with reality? And then if somebody can read, so we can just close out here, what the Bible says. Ecclesiastes 7:20, really quick, just pull out your phones. And somebody else look up Galatians 3:3. Let's just camp out on those two. Go.
Surely there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins.
So, there is no righteous person. You cannot be perfect. It's impossible. We sinned. It ended at Adam and Eve. That's it. End of story. So from that point on, we have to stop dragging it through. Galatians 3:3.
Are you so foolish, having begun by the Spirit, are you being perfected by the flesh?
So, trying to gain this perfection in our human flesh, impossible. Whatever we are, remember what I told you earlier, like I realized that even at my lowest point, whatever I was because of the grace of God. And because He allowed me to be at that, to do those things that I was doing, or to be that person for somebody. So we have to stop leaning into that perfectionism as the solution to everything and actually start living through whose righteousness? Who makes us righteous? Is it us? It's through Christ. Okay? So do away with the veneer lifestyle, and don't put up a charade, don't hide behind a mask, because a fake, made-up life will only lead to more discontentment and insecurity down the line. Put it down and find the people that are really there for you, that are going to care for you just the way that you are. All right, we are basically out of time. If you guys, I did send a picture, so if anybody wants to stay and kind of hover with your groups and look over certain things, you can. I put some questions, I highlighted some questions in the book. So if you guys want to do that, maybe just for 5 minutes to kind of huddle up and talk about those things as a group. So if you can, if your parents are waiting, that's okay. Apologize.